What is going on, everyone? It is Steiner with a very, very, very special episode of Secondhand Talent. We have the Celebrate shirt on for a reason. Thank you, Mark Spusta, for the art. Thank you, Luke Chu, for the Lo-Fi, our featured toy of the season. And thank you, of course, to Tenacious Toys for the lovely desk candy. Now, I would like to introduce this week's guest. Let's get right to it. We have with us the Christopher Thorn, owner and founder of Fireside Sound Studios. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much, man. Good to talk to you.
Well, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on. And before we delve into the interview, I got to ask you our first question. When I had first reached out and said, I have a podcast called Secondhand Talent, what was your immediate reaction to what that podcast could be about?
Well, the first thing you think is I'm first rate, and then the first thing you go is like second rate. Well, this is not for me.
And we're going to get into that, folks. We're going to get
I
into that.
have enough of an ego to say, well, I'm definitely not second rate. That's for sure. No, but then honestly, here's the truth. When Mario explained it to me, I was like, you know what? That's fantastic because it's been missed. You know what I mean? People have not gone there with what makes things happen. Before you see a show, there's a bunch of people who have done a whole bunch of work before that artist got to that stage. So I think it's a fantastic idea. So when Mario explained it to me, I was like, oh yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah, and for those of our listeners or viewers or readers who don't know, Mario is our AR guy. We love you, Mario. Shout out to you, buddy.
He also
Thank you
helped
for
build my
everything.
studio. He also helped build my
He,
studio.
Mario's a certified legend, like Secondhand Talent certified legend, like
Yeah, he is.
really like
He's a Renaissance
indispensable to
man.
the show. Indispensable to the show, Mario. We absolutely love you. Um,
Not only did
and
he build my studio, him and his brother got my go-kart running so freaking good. I have a go-kart that was broken, and those guys came over and dialed it in, and it's so fast right now. It's so fun. Yeah. Props
well,
to Mario
he's a truly,
and
truly a
Jaime
man
too,
of
his brother. Yeah, he is.
uh,
He's great.
to all of the Correa clan. Um, Truly a remarkable individual and absolutely an asset to the show. And it wouldn't be the same without him. So we're really glad he's a part of the team. But you're right. You are first rate, but you're also right. And Mario explained it to you. And just for our folks who are maybe just tuning in for the first time, Secondhand Talent is where we shine the spotlight on the people who shine the spotlight. We like to highlight the rest of the villagers in the village it takes
It's a great
to
phrase
put
too.
on.
That's exactly right. It's great.
No, thank you very much. Because it does, I like to say it takes a village to put on a concert, and it takes about the population of Wyoming to put on Lollapalooza.
Yeah, it's true. That's
But,
true.
Christopher, as you said so rightly, so many people who show up for doors at 7:30 don't know that the day really started at 9 for almost everybody in the venue by the time you get there.
It's true.
And there's a lot of hard work that
Yeah,
goes into in many different
absolutely.
aspects
Absolutely.
that
It's
goes
huge.
into each and every show, and then just scale it exponentially based on the
Hmm.
size of the venue.
Hmm. It's true.
And it's so important to say thank you. And that's what
Agreed.
really one of the biggest messages I've wanted to get across with the show from the beginning is, when you're going through security at an arena show to, thank the security person who's having a rough time as thousands of people are flooding in trying to get past. Say
Absolutely.
thanks to your bartenders, tip your bartenders, say thank you to the merch person who's carefully folding your poster to make sure it doesn't get creased,
Yeah.
like it doesn't take much effort, and it goes such a long way.
I agree, and as a band, we try to do that as we're going through a tour. To me, the first guy I'm thanking is the monitor guy and the stage crew. When I get there and they've loaded my gear in and they've done that hard work already, the first thing when I get to the stage for sound check, I'm making sure I shake hands with everybody who I don't know because it's the local crew many times. Say, man, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you. That goes a long way.
And you took the words right out of my head. I was gonna go right into that and admit that as a comedian, I am guaranteed the least hardworking person in the venue.
Without doubt. Me
At
too.
at any given point in time,
Me
and
too.
I
Yeah,
I make my best effort to say thank you to all of the staff,
me too.
but it's so important to encourage others to as well,
I agree.
not just to say it, but to set the example and do it,
That's
and
exactly right.
it's hugely important, and it's hugely important to what you do. But as you did mention, you are first grade. For folks who don't know, Christopher is one of the founding members of a band you may have heard of called Blind Melon, as well as a member of Afghan Whigs and AWOLNATION, and has toured and played with many, many others. Christopher, when did your journey in music really begin?
Well, I would say I grew up with my mother, playing acoustic guitar to me, and she played a lot of folk songs and, Jim Croce and, Woody Guthrie and songs like that. So I grew up at the my earliest memories are my mother, playing guitar for me. But then at some point, I realized I was terrible at sports. And, I just, and then I fell in love with the guitar. Maybe at like 12 or 13, I got my first guitar, and then it was just everything. I just made a commitment at that point. I just wanted to make records the rest of my life. I knew from that age, I would say 12 or 13, like this is what I'm doing. This is all my focus. And I just was I had laser focus, I would say, and I wanted it really bad. I wanted to be able to make records for a living.
Well, how soon, you said 12 or 13. How soon did you form your first band?
I would
And was it
say
called Rot? Is that
yeah.
correct, or was it
Yeah, very good.
ROT?
Yeah. Yeah, I was in Pennsylvania, in the late 80s, and I would say probably by maybe I'm like 15 or 16, cuz I had a fake ID so that I could go play clubs and stuff. I had a really funny fake ID cuz I looked like I was 8 years old when I was 15, you know what I mean? I always looked, way too young. But somehow I had this fake ID and I was able to go play clubs in ROT, and we made a demo. I drove out to Los Angeles and delivered the demo to like little record companies. And, I was a hustler, man. I wanted it. And then in 1988, I decided that living in Pennsylvania was not the place for
Mm.
me. And I
Whereabouts in Pennsylvania, if you
York,
feel
Pennsylvania. I'm from
comfortable?
a small little
Mm,
town.
yeah,
It's
sure.
30 minutes from Harrisburg. I mean, I'm a country boy. I'm in the middle of nowhere. There is no scene. There's no scene. There's no, I don't really know of people who make art for a living. I really didn't. Growing up, I didn't know anyone who made art, whether it was paintings or sculpture or record making. I didn't know anyone who did that for a living. So when I went to 2 years of college, and then I was like, this is not for me. And I quit college and moved out in 1988 to Los Angeles, basically because I just knew I wanted to be in the music business, and I knew that's where the music business was.
Well, how soon after that? First of all, so you said 2 years of college, so you were what, 19, 20 when you moved out
Yeah, I wasn't
west?
even 21. Yeah, I wasn't even 21 when I moved to Los Angeles. I was 20, I think, 19 or 20.
And what was that transition like from going to from, middle of, nowhere near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to LA?
Well,
How
I,
did
I
you
had an
adapt?
I had an aunt who lived out there. So one, I had that great support system. She lived in Brentwood, and she was always there for me. And I had been going out to visit her since I was a kid in the 70s. So I knew I loved LA. And it was an
Did
exciting
you
time.
did you Oh, sorry, I just out of curiosity, you mentioned the 70s. Did you fly out there? Did you take the train? What
Well,
was
both. We would fly out to see my aunt all the time, and then we actually drove across the country when my aunt Anne got married in like '77 or something. As a kid, the family drove out, and I remember the first time I saw Venice Beach, I was like, "Oh, these are my people." Because like I guess like when you're a kid, you don't understand like oh your tribe or like you're this sort of you don't really know. You're trying to fit in, and then you go to Venice Beach and you go, "Wow, I can be anything I want to be." I can be anything. I can reinvent myself. I can move here and reinvent myself and be exactly who I always wanted to be, which is hard to do in a small town many times. You can't really be depends who you are. But for me, I just felt like I couldn't really be who I wanted to be in Pennsylvania. People look down on
well,
people who wanted to make art for a living. That seemed stupid and crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes sense for the time, but choosing the Venice Beach over the greater, I think what people consider to be maybe the central Los Angeles area.
Yeah.
I think that was a particularly good move because you weren't forcing yourself into the center, but you were putting yourself in the immediate vicinity of everything that was going on.
Yeah, Venice is great. I eventually, when I moved out, I actually moved into Hollywood, but my aunt lived over there by Venice and stuff, so I'd still always go and hang out. But it was the first people I saw when I moved to Venice that made me realize, oh wow, there's a whole world out here, and
Mm.
these are the people who probably think more like I think. And it was just, it was really an incredible time. It was exciting, and I didn't really have a plan. I had no plan. I just came out to Los Angeles and I put an ad in. At that time, pre-internet, there was a magazine called Music Connection or The Recycler, and I put ads out just trying to meet people. And I met Brad Smith, and then a year later, I was Blind Melon formed. So it happened pretty quick when I moved out. We were signed by 91, so I was only in LA for, a little bit of time before we got a record deal.
And is it true that one of the original names considered was Head Train?
Yeah, it was. Terrible name. There's also Brown Cow. We actually didn't have a record. We had a record deal without a band name because we never played one live show. Blind Melon got
But did it?
signed from no, we never played one live show before we got a record deal.
But didn't you sign your record deal on the top of the Capitol Records building?
We did, and we did private showcases for all the record companies in like a rehearsal studio. So we had never played a live show when we got a record deal. So we didn't
Wow.
have a we didn't really have a band name. So when the contract literally got sent over for us to sign, they were like, "You guys have before they sent it over, they were like, you guys have to have a name so we can send the contract." So Brown Cow was one of them. Head Train. Then at some point, Blind Melon came up, and it was like, "Yeah, whatever, great."
It's better than the other two. Let's go with that
It
one.
was honestly the decision was it's better than the other two. That was basically that was definitely that was that was definitely it. I would say that's accurate.
And and as a fan, I mean, Blind Melon and Soup, and then ultimately Nico, were formative, and I'm a '90s kid, and Change and Tones of Home, and obviously, of course, No Rain, but I mean, so many of Change, especially for me, was a really, really, really important song in my life, and
Appreciate that.
it yeah, I gotta ask. I'm just genuinely curious. This is also a fan asked question. What was your favorite Blind Melon song to play, or what is your favorite Blind Melon song to play? Since I mean the
One of
band
my
is
f-
back together, but we'll talk
yeah,
about it
yeah,
later.
what well I'll say two
But
things.
with Shannon, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, one of my favorite songs that we ever recorded is a song on the Soup record called Car Seat. As far as a song goes, we never played it. We played it like once or twice live. We never really played it live, but Car Seat's one of my favorite. And I would say the other song for me to play is Soup. The song Soup, which is on the Nico record, is probably my favorite song. One of my favorite songs, definitely to play.
Yeah. Gosh. I mean, with obviously, our RIP, but just such an incredible talent, and it's so amazing. I mean, did you guys appreciate it in the moment that it of what was happening, or was it really kind of only a later reflection that it was?
I mean, I knew it was happening when it was happening, but so much was happening so fast for us that I didn't digest anything. Here's the truth: the career happened so quick, and Shannon's death, that by the time Shannon died, I'm still trying to wrap my head around 3 years earlier in our career and how it happened. And so
Mm,
it was a really confusing time. It was like that's what it was. It was just going by so fast. And I would say you didn't have time to digest it in any way because it was just on to the next thing. Hey, you're doing this. Now you're doing this. Now you're opening for the Stones. Now you're on the cover of Rolling Stone. Now you're opening for Neil Young, your favorite artist. Now you're opening. It was just like one thing after the next. It was nonstop, and we worked nonstop in those 5 years that the band. Really, the career is only 5 years. 5 years, really.
So I was gonna say nonstop work and nonstop output and nonstop demand,
And then it's over.
and then the ultimate grief. My so let's. I don't want to dwell on the moment, but how did you cope? How did you process and move forward? Like, what did you decide that you needed to find another space in music to occupy,
Already been
or
Well, I was already a producer while I was in Blind Melon. I was already finding artists on the road, doing demos for them, helping them get record deals. So I had already not one foot out of Blind Melon, but I saw the writing on the wall in the sense that I just knew I wanted to make records forever. And it was a tough time in Blind Melon, and you just never knew, what was going to happen. So I was always attracted to being a record producer. So even while I was in Blind Melon, I always had the producer hat on. I always wore the producer hat, so to speak. I always thought like a producer more than the guitar player. So I traveled once we made some money and I had some money. I traveled with a recording studio, which this is pre laptops and pre being able to record everywhere. So I had a 5 foot tall rack that got wheeled into my room. That got wheeled into my room every night. So I was making records while I was on tour with Blind Melon.
that's insane. I mean, I've been on the road with the band before just thinking about producing a record while being on the road makes
Yeah, I
me
was doing
like
demos. I was finding, yeah, it's crazy. I was finding artists. I'd find an artist backstage. Hey, I'm a singer. Okay, sing for me. Oh shit, you're really good. Meet me at the hotel tonight after the show at 1 o'clock in the morning, and we'll record some demos in my hotel room. I did that a
a-
bunch.
anyone notable off the top of your head?
I mean, people know who Jenna Kraus is. You know what I mean. So she was, she was on our second record, and a lot of the time, a lot of it was for Shannon. Shannon would call me at 2 in the morning and say, "Hey, I have an idea. Can I come down?" Yeah, come on down to my room. Sure. My studio was set up every night, so I was just always tweaking and fiddling and learning. I mean, it's the beginning of my producing career, so I'm also learning how to use the gear and doing a
Because
lot
you
of
were
stuff like that.
working, yeah, because you were working at such an intense pace with so much output and having the studio set up so much of the time, I feel like I have to ask the question: is there more material that's archived, that's there, that's
Yeah, there's a lot.
banked?
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah. Capitol
Folks,
Records has tied our hands. Capitol Records has tied our hands on releasing some of that stuff. I'll leave it at that. We're working. We're
okay.
working. We're working on that. We're working on that. So, but yes, we have a lot. I have an entire acoustic record of Shannon's. Some of it recording in hotel rooms and other places. So yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of material. I just need the time to kind of go through it, but it will get released. We also have hours and hours and hours of live performances that were recorded. Back in those days, the format was called ADAT. It was a digital format. So we have hours and hours and hours of live recordings, and all that stuff. I'd like it all to come out at some point. And I think once we figure out the Capitol Records thing, because they're kind of tying our hands as far as releasing stuff, I think once we figure that out, we'll be able to release a bunch of really, really special stuff. I mean, I have magical stuff of just Shannon in my hotel room late at night singing a song that he just wrote, songs that everybody knows. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. Oh, here's Mouthful of Cavities. Here's three different versions of Mouthful of Cavities with three different lyrics. That's the other thing about Shannon is he would interchange some of the lyrics with other songs. Sometimes you'd hear him working on a song and you'd hear like a certain lyric, and then the next day it would be like a whole new song, and you'd be like, hold it, which song is that? Is that? And he was just always, he walked around a lot and played. That's the one thing about Shannon. He was always had an acoustic guitar around. He's always strumming and playing. So I grabbed as much of that stuff as I could. And I have a lot of stuff. I have a lot of his process, a lot of him kind of working stuff up, early versions of songs. I do have a lot of that stuff.
Folks, if you've been listening or reading, please like and subscribe on YouTube. For the last 2 minutes while Christopher has been talking, I've just had a flabbergasted expression on my face. Just being a fan, and we may have a question section later that will address some of those recordings, and we'll see if we have time for that. So, on your journey on the road, for pretty much the entirety of it, you're working kind of this dual role as a musician and a producer. So is that just kind of the direction you took once the band ended?
Absolutely. It wasn't a question of what am I going to do now when Shannon passed away. I already knew what I wanted to do, and I was already, producing records and finding artists and helping them develop and trying to, help them get a record deal. So when Shannon passed away, I'd already built a studio at that point in my house in Seattle. I got to work right away. And that's how I dealt with, Shannon's death was really just getting to work. It's all I knew. The only thing I knew was just to get back to work. And I also, because I tasted what it was like to never have a real job, I was so in
Uh,
fear, and fear drove me to work 15-hour days every day because I just never wanted to have a job that was something I didn't want to do, and I loved making records. So I put everything into it, and I just put my head down, and that's how I dealt with the grief, was just to get to work, and I made a lot of records.
I think a part of it that a lot of people don't realize is that it's not just a direct path from point A to gold records behind you. It is a lot of work. I mean, for
It
every
was.
episode that we produce, each episode, for every episode that's 45 minutes, that's 4.5 hours easy that I've worked on that
Exactly.
episode.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just because of status, relevancy, accolades, connections, anything like that, that brings you from success in one avenue of talent to
Yeah.
success in another. It really does require that grind.
It really is, and, like, it wasn't like I was born with some, like, incredible perfect pitch, blah, blah, blah. I had to work at it, you know what I mean? Like, I'm good at what I do because I put in a shit ton of hours. People talk about 10,000, I have 10,000,000 hours, you know what I mean? Like, on what I do. It's all I do every day, but it's what I love, and it's what I always wanted to do, so it wasn't hard for me to focus on that. It's all I ever wanted to do. So it's just what I put my head to.
I mean, it's really something that we try to stress with the show as well. My entry into live music was definitely not at musician as a musician. I'm fumble fingers over here, but I realized that live events, especially festivals, needed an MC.
Hmm.
So I figured, well, I'm good with spoken word.
Yeah, cool.
Let me try to do comedy. I'm already on the radio. Let me kind of hone my craft a little bit. Being a producer is one thing, being a business owner is another. When did you kind of start to develop the concept that, okay, I'm producing records, I'm finding artists, I'm helping them create records. Okay, it's time to turn this into a business. Was Fireside Sound Studio the first studio that you had, or so let's talk
No,
about that. What
yeah,
was the
I'm gonna
first
say
one?
my first studio in Seattle was a place called Lucky Dog, which because I felt like one lucky fucker, and so I that was my first studio. And here's a little side note: Kevin Martin from Candlebox helped me build that studio.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a friend of mine, and at this point he's sold millions of records. He doesn't need to strap on a tool belt ever. And Kevin Martin showed up every day at 8 in the morning with a tool belt on and helped me build my studio, along with this other guy named Jeff. We called him Fiddly. But anyway, so
Fiddly. It's like the type of name you'd find working at like a vintage store or something like that.
yeah, he's a
Like
great guy.
imagine.
It's just still a really good friend of mine, Kevin, as well. But I have to give props to Kevin. So at that point, I knew it was a business. At that point, you know what I mean. It was a proper business. I was recording bands and I was working for record companies. Record companies were reaching out to me and sending me artists. So immediately after Shannon passed away, it immediately became, a business, a proper business.
And when did Fireside begin though?
Well, there's
Because
one
I know
studio.
that that's your
Yeah,
pride
it's my
and
studio
joy.
now, but
So like,
we're missing one little link. So I had the studio in Seattle, and then in 2000 I moved back down to Los Angeles. I was in Seattle at the time, so I moved back down to LA with Brad Smith, the bass player for Blind Melon.
real quick, what
Yep.
prompted the move to Seattle?
The move to Seattle was prompted because So Blind Melon got signed in Los Angeles, and then we immediately left and went to Durham, California. So after we went to Durham, then from Durham, we went to Seattle to make our record at a studio called London Bridge. And then at that point, I didn't have a place, no one had a place to live. So after we were done making the record, it was like, oh, where do you want to live? And I was like, wow, I love Seattle. So I stayed for 7 years. But the rain, the reason why I left is the rain got to me at some point. But I had an amazing time in Seattle. It was the best time in Seattle, it was the 90s. All my friends were bands on the radio and we are all hanging out, making music together. It was a beautiful time. But the rain got to me. So anyway, I moved back down to Los Angeles with Brad Smith from Blind Melon, and we opened up a commercial recording studio in North Hollywood called Studio Wishbone. And that studio went on for 10, 12, 15 years, something like a good long time was that studio. And then at some point, I sold that studio, or at least my half, to Brad. And then I built a studio in Silver Lake. Fireside Sound originally starts in Silver Lake. I have a house in Silver Lake in a back house, which is a studio. And then we bought this property out here in Joshua Tree. So we did so Fireside Sound Silver Lake, Fireside Sound Joshua Tree. We basically have two studios. This is the main studio for now because it's where I live, but we still have the studio in Silver Lake.
So why Fireside?
Oh, good
Why
question.
Fireside
There,
Sound?
no, great question. There was literally a fireplace in Silver Lake in my control room. If you look like there's a bookshelf there in Silver Lake, you look back there and there's a fireplace in the control room. you know,
So
so
there was a fireplace and there was sound. So
Fireside Sound. It also is a takeoff on, I believe, like Roosevelt had when he spoke to people. It was called Fireside Chats. People would gather around the radio, and I believe it's Roosevelt. I could be wrong, but
I was actually thinking about naming this episode Fireside Chat because
yeah,
of
yeah,
the play
exactly
on the
right.
name of the
And so
studio. Yep.
it is a takeoff on that as well, and the fact that I had a fireplace in my studio, it just made sense.
Love that. That just like, you know what? We need to do this thing that really shouldn't be an inconvenience. So why let it be? So let's just like look at what's in front of us and just use that and
Sure.
move on to the
Yeah,
things that really matter.
totally.
I love that. That being said, like I also my immediate association was the fireside chat. That was,
Yeah, that's good.
I was on the radio for a couple of years and I absolutely love the medium. And I'll
Me
actually,
too.
uh, in a month, I'll be on the radio again with my brother's band, who are going to be coming through Chicago.
Very cool.
And I'm looking forward to being back at the station after, 13 years.
Yeah, man.
And
I love radio
it's
too.
there's something special about it in the way that like you're able to like when you talk people are listening. It's not like it's recording and you're hoping someone's going to listen someday in the future.
Yeah,
Like you're talking and people are listening now,
it's
and
amazing.
it's this
Yeah,
interactivity that just
yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
exist anymore.
yeah. It's
So
true.
now, I just wanna for our listeners and viewers and readers out there, you'll notice I've had this paper with me here. I've got copious notes for this interview. Now, I have to mention a couple of names that pop out to me on this list, but before that. I saw Daniel Donato recently came out and recorded some things at the studio. What was that like having out a younger up and coming artist who's really kind of making his chops in fusing the country and rock and jam scenes?
Yeah, man, Daniel's amazing. I had met him through Danny Clinch, who's a real good friend of mine. I'm actually making a record with Danny Clinch as well. But anyway, Danny Clinch turned, I think, 60, and he came out to
I was
Joshua
gonna
Tree.
ask you about Danny
Yeah, yeah. So we
separately,
had a
but
we had a week long Danny Clinch party. Basically, we had a week of like eating, drinking, and making music. And Daniel Donato just happened to be playing Pappy and Harriet's. So Danny Clinch went up to Pappy and Harriet's, shot a video for Daniel Donato. They also shot a video here at Fireside Sound. And
hmm
there's an artist named Jesse Malin who's an absolute legend, and he needed some medical attention. He had something happen to him, put him in a wheelchair, and so everybody we were doing this benefit record for him. So Danny Clinch is singing a Jesse Malin song, and his backup band is Daniel Donato's backup band. So that's how that whole thing happened. And I just want to say The song that we did, and my son even worked on it with me, is in the new movie with Bill Murray called Riff Raff. It's the closing credit song, is the song we recorded here in Joshua Tree. So if you go see the movie, we have the closing credit song, and it's a beautiful Jesse Malin song.
Wow.
So yeah, that's how that whole thing happened. But Daniel's a friend. The whole band's a friend. You know, I've hung out a bunch with them, and Joe, their tour manager, is a good friend of mine. And yeah, they're amazing. And honestly, Daniel's the best guitar player on the planet. Jesus, he's incredible.
I
He's brilliant.
had the good. I've only seen them once. Sickard Hollow, Matt Rennick, who was on the show in season 2, friend of the show, opened for them. They were great, and Daniel was. I mean, they were just wonderful. I
He's
mean,
incredible.
they really just blew the roof off the place,
They
and
do.
it. I mean, the man knows how to turn up a room. Let's just leave it
Sure
at
does,
that. I mean,
man. He's incredible.
he's a real Daniel. Shout out to you, man.
Yeah,
Hope you
man.
see
Shout out
this.
to Daniel Donato for sure. Nicest
So
guy too.
you had Post Malone out.
Yeah, Post was in my
What wa-
Silver Lake place, and
what was that like?
well, so as a studio owner, I have two business models. One is I just rent out my studio because people love my space, and I get to go hang out and do nothing. And then there's artists that I actually work with. I didn't actually work with Post Malone, but he came and spent whatever, I don't know. He was there for a couple weeks or something in my Silver Lake spot. So basically in Silver Lake we have a house, and then there's the back house is the studio. So we would rent out the house, and they'd put their whole crew in our house, and then they'd use the studio. Yeah, because we had this property at that time. So anytime somebody booked Silver Lake and wanted the house, wanted residential, we would just come out to Joshua Tree and live out here.
So
So
I was about to say this place. Now talk a little bit about this place in Joshua Tree. We
yeah,
got a little bit of a glimpse earlier, and
yeah.
maybe we can
So
show
yeah,
some of that later. But talk to us about how this came into being.
well, we had really great friends who all lived out here. They're actually all my neighbors. Dave Ketching, who has the most legendary, famous studio ever out here, is a place called Rancho de la Luna. And some of my absolute favorite records were all recorded there. It's the greatest scene. You go over, they're making dinner. Everyone, oh, hey, we're jamming tonight. Come over, or making dinner and jamming. And like, they were just doing that. So we were coming out and hanging out. And my wife had a friend named Amanda who lived in the same area, and at some point, her friend Amanda's like, "Hey, this property is for sale right beside us. It's 35 acres, and I know you guys love it out here, and you wanted to buy a place out here." So we pulled the trigger and bought this place. And like I said, it's 35 acres. It needed a bunch of work, but there was a lot of buildings. We had 5 buildings on this property. So we just kind of went to each one, fixed them up, made cabins, made guest cabins, made the studio, making a little cantina, a little place for people to hang out. So we're just kind of building, like, we just wanted the perfect experience for people to make records. I'm going to make records the rest of my life. So I just thought, I just want to make the greatest place. You know what I mean? So, that was the
Well, I
goal.
think that's something that people also take for granted. I mean, obviously, we've got some amazing studios here in Chicago. Shout out. But there is something to be said for a studio and a studio space. You know, or rather, a studio space and a space that has a studio in it.
Now there you go.
You
You
know,
just nailed it. When people ask me about my studio, this is what I say. This is my line, and you just kind of said it for me. My line is, I've been making records my whole life. I'm coming up on 40 years of record making. I don't ever want to be in a recording studio ever. I've spent too much time in a dark spot with no windows making records. I want to be in my living room that functions at a high level as far as the gear goes and the connectivity. So I want it to feel like a proper studio, but I want it to feel like my living room. That's why I have a bookshelf in the background, and that's why I have windows everywhere. I just was sick of making records in these dark little holes, and I felt like I was missing out on life because I didn't know what time of day it was. You know what I mean? So that was my goal when I went to build this studio. I wanted to build what feels like a home, but functions as a very high studio as far as the gear goes and the way it works.
and speaking of the gear, which we'll get to in just a second, but a prelude to the gear up to this point as well, you have quite the collection of instruments that you've amassed. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is it correct that just my note? I'm silly with these notes here, but now during an interview you received a mandolin from Robert Hunter. Is
Yeah,
that
it was a
is that
blind.
accurate?
Yeah, it was a Blind Melon interview. The
Hmm.
magazine Cream at some point in the '90s, they would do this cool thing where they would go to like somebody old school, like, one of the legends in the business, and that person would interview the new and up and comers. So they used Robert Hunter, who wrote all the song, all my favorite songs for the Grateful Dead, legendary poet, wonderful, wonderful man. They connected us with Robert Hunter. So we played at the Fillmore. We're on tour at the Fillmore. We go up to Robert Hunter's house. We're sitting around his living room doing the interview. And at some point, he starts making fun of the mandolin that I was playing normally. I had this other mandolin, kind of this old beat up mandolin. So I was kind of making fun of it. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. And then at some point, he walks over and he hands me David Grisman's mandolin. He's like, oh, this is David Grisman's mandolin. He hands it to me. And then I'm like standing in a room with I'm sitting in a
What,
room with a bunch of people and he just hands it to me and I'm like, oh, am I supposed to like perform for you now? Like it just felt weird and awkward. And he goes, it's yours. And I was like, what? He's like, I'm giving it to you. And then I was just like,
dude?
oh my God. It's like a 1918 or 1920 mandolin that was David Grisman's and,
And it was
Jerry.
David Grossman's.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And Old and in the Way was one of my favorite records. You know what I mean? Old and in the Way, one of my favorite records. So, like, yeah, to me, it was such a moment. I still have that mandolin to this day. I don't know where it is. It might be in my son's room. I don't see it down here. I think
Well,
my son has it in his bedroom.
I'm folks. Again, if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please go ahead and do so. I just to see the expression on my face as Christopher was telling that story. That is, I, I was. Thanks, Mom. I was raised a deadhead, and
Yeah, thanks, Mom.
I absolutely love Robert Hunter,
Yeah,
and
me too.
what Bobby did with Thunder is amazing, and I just love it. Yeah, everything he's written is wonderful, and it's hard to say that about a lot of people. And to
He became a good friend to Shannon's after we did the interview. Shortly after that, we released the Soup record and got a god awful review in Rolling Stone. And Robert Hunter sent the most beautiful letter to
oh
Shannon. And I can't even, it's hard for me to paraphrase. Basically, the gist of it was like, fuck them. You make fucking art. Fuck them. And fuck what they think about your art. Who fucking cares? Basically, I'm summing it up. But it was beautifully written, eloquently written. And it's online. It
yeah.
could be online somewhere. I think somebody released that letter that Robert Hunter. So it was really sweet. And Shannon, when we were making the Soup record, was sending his lyrics to Robert Hunter to get his like approval and stuff. So they became like kind of little kind of buddies, little pen pal buddies, before Shannon passed away.
Wild little factoid there. That is
Yeah,
I did not know. That is
yeah,
insane.
yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah.
Um, Now, speaking of Joshua Tree, now you mentioned 5 buildings, and you've really been building that out. You mentioned there's the guest house, of course, and there's your house, and there's the studio, and you
Two
mentioned
guest houses.
building.
Yeah, two guest
uh,
houses, a cantina, which is like a hangout room, and then the main studio, and then I had my main house.
And now, am I reading? I just want to make sure that I'm reading these two names correctly here. So I'm going to take off my glasses and move this piece of paper very close to my eyes. I see listed here. Um, 3 names? That's 3 names I have to read? I'm sorry. Matt Sorum, Bruce Springsteen, and Deftones.
Yeah, it's all true. They've all been here.
Now, can I ask you something? Um, Building a place where the studio is and not building the studio. Was the purpose and intent of that, or part of the purpose and intent, to provide just that immersive experience for the artist as well? I mean, because you need that immersion as a producer to be able to
Exactly.
understand the process and their creative direction.
Yeah,
But what you've done is almost kind of an inverted and expanded version of that, where you've went ahead and just created a whole environment for them to exist in coincidence with yourself in order to allow not just for creativity on both sides, but conversation and dialogue to happen. Did that happen with artists with the like, I mean, who like I can't even words are
I'll tell you one thing. Let me tell you one thing. So, and by the way, I have to add in my wife to this equation because she is the
of
architect,
course.
the designer. She's the one. She's the one who built all these. I had nothing. I'm always working in the studio, and while I'm working in the studio, she's working on another part of the property, building another beautiful building. So, and one of the
And
things. What were we gonna say?
big shout out to my wife Steiner who does all of our social media and all the
There
extra
you
house
go.
stuff for Secondhand Talent. Love you, babe.
Yeah, yep. Shout out to her as well. And so my wife Heather, she's really the one who's built all of this. A lot of this is her vision, her aesthetic. She knows I love what she does. She knows me enough to know who I am that she just builds some. I say build something beautiful, and I'll make records the rest of my life, and we'll be good. And that's really to boil it down. And I'll tell you one other thing. There's been there was one experience that we had. In I'm trying to think what in 1998 we made a record at I was in the band Live at the time, and I made a record, the Distance to Here record, with the band Live at a place called The Site, which is outside of San Francisco. And it was the first experience I had where it was just like, an amazing studio, but you were sequestered away from everybody, isolated, and the whole experience was just family style. And it just felt like, oh man, this is the dream. This is what I want to build. And there's a couple moments in two movies that is something I've been chasing my whole life. I remember watching these John Lennon documentaries, and there's this one documentary, and there's a shot of them making John Lennon's record, and they're all in the kitchen eating dinner together. And that, to me, like that one image for me, and this is something I saw in my 20s, like when I was watching these documentaries about John Lennon and stuff. And for some reason, that was like, that's what I want. I want that experience. I want to like make records, but then I want to sit around the dinner table, break bread together. So that's a part of what we do here. It's not just the recording studio. We eat and then we have a wonderful dinner outside on the patio and enjoy the sunset together. And those were the experiences I wanted. I made a lot of records in LA where you kind of clock in, you go to Sunset Sound, there's no windows, you work a 12-hour, 13-hour day, and you drive home, you never saw the sun. You ordered some Thai food in, you ate in 10 minutes, and you got back to work. And I just had done that for years, and I just didn't want that anymore. I wanted the experience to feel like a family. You know what I mean? So that's what we've created here. And somebody like Noah Kahn was here 2 weeks ago. I don't know Noah Kahn. Once again, Danny Clinch introduced me, and he said Noah's going to be in Joshua Tree, and he wants to book some time. I said, yeah, have him come by. We had dinner together. I get to meet Noah Kahn. We hang out for a couple hours having dinner, and he gets back to work. So that was the experience that we wanted to create for people. We wanted them to have the best experience here, and it's worked out.
And what I'm hearing you put so diplomatically well is that it's just a unique experience working with each artist that comes through, and whatever it is, and that's part of the beauty of it is
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
there is no schedule or preset notion or preconceptions, no matter who it is that comes and has their time there, no matter what their level, whatever equivalent adjective you'd like to use,
sure,
to just
sure.
to replace that with. It doesn't matter, they're all equally important because they're the person who are there at Fireside Sound.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, that to me sounds warm and lovely and cozy, just like being right by the fireside. And I mean, I think one thing that you said was super important, breaking bread and having at least a meal. Because
Always.
one of the, in my long, blessedly long and continued career in entertainment, one thing that I have noticed time and again is that failure is almost always associated with a lack of communication.
Nailed it. You nailed
And
it. You nailed it. You're exactly right. I have a manager named Keith Isola. He's been with me as long as I can remember. He's also one of my best friends. He also happens to be my manager. And anytime there's a problem within our band, he always says, "Go break bed. Go break bread. Go have dinner. Go have dinner and talk about what you need to talk about. Don't send a shitty text. Don't send a shitty email." You know what I mean? That's not how you communicate. Go have dinner together and you'll work it out. And it's been the best advice, and I really believe in it. And that's, oh, Keith says it every time there's an issue in our band. Guys need to go have dinner. You know?
I've been learning this myself. Have been booking my brother's tour. My first time ever booking a tour, and there was a learning curve where even though he's my brother, I had to. There were a few times where I wrote out a text message and I read it back, and I was like, you know what? I need to call him. I need to
Yeah,
talk to him. Or I need
exactly.
to we need a FaceTime. Like we need to see
Exactly
each
right.
other because I need him to understand that what I'm saying comes from a place of love. And that's not going to happen via text message.
It never
And
does. Texting's one of the worst formats when it comes to trying to communicate with something important.
absolute or with any sort of emphasis or emotion. And
Yeah,
because,
exactly. Yeah.
I tell my students this all the time, like the intention reception paradox, no matter how much we mean something or what, the best laid plans of mice and men gang after glory, like
Yeah.
we have no say in the matter when it comes to how the person hears it or
Yep.
how the person interprets it. So
Absolutely.
even if it's one meal, to be able to, break bread and have dialogue with the folks whose record you're producing, I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
essential.
Yeah. Absolutely. We had a band called Silverstein. They do quite well, actually. They have a new record out. Wonderful, wonderful guys. They were here for 5 weeks. Not a record that I produced, but it was just great having them on the property for 5 weeks. We were making them dinner. My wife was making them, a vegan tart in the mornings. And, they're riding go-karts and shooting BB guns. And it's a whole experience here. It's not just making a record here. It's like we want people to have the best experience they've ever had. And that's just really because I've been making records for so long. I just know what I don't want. And I know what allows me to make the best records. So that's what we've tried to create here.
I think one of the big differences in the way you and I have been talking about this is I keep saying the word produce and you keep saying the word make. And I think you're right. There is a distinction. There is a distinction in producing a record versus making a record. There's more, that personal touch. There's more love that goes into making a record.
Absolutely,
And
man. Absolutely.
I feel like that's a term that has gotten lost
Yeah, sure.
in the digital age. Really, especially, and again, we talked about DJ Mustard earlier, no shade on producers whatsoever. But it's one thing to, produce a beat or produce a record, and it's another thing to be involved in the process, or at least, you know, in the same vicinity as the group recording the material and getting to meet them and getting to know them and not having to be some kind of like, I believe the word you used earlier was perfect, this kind of alien experience where it's
Yeah,
like you're coming in,
exactly.
you're in a box that's windowless and you're
Yeah,
kind of mechanically doing this thing with no real feel for what's going on.
exactly. Yeah.
And I think that the more we talk, the more I love the name Fireside Sound is because I feel like the only, think of the cackle and hiss that comes from the
Yeah,
fire, and that's that warm, comfortable sound, and I think you can only achieve that with that personal touch.
exactly. And when people build a fire, everyone's around it and it's a way to communicate and hang out. You build a fire, you hang out, you crack a beer or a glass of wine, you bullshit and hang out. And that's what we're after.
So, folks, we've got a little special section of the episode here called Questions from the Fiends Corner, where we have questions from the Heady Wax Fiends Records Club. First of all, shout out to the club. Check out our interview with the founder, Chris Howland, the CHO, the Chief Heady Officer from season 3. The first question is, would you ever consider pressing For My Friends? I really like this album with Travis, and it deserves a vinyl release, maybe for the 20th anniversary.
I couldn't agree more. And without I swear to you on my life, right before I called you, I was on the phone with my manager and we literally just rolled out a whole plan to try to get For My Friends out. So there's been some legal things, and that's the reason why that record's not out. I'm super proud of that record. I want it to be out, but we have plans to print up vinyl to put it out. So yes, I agree, and we're working on that. And we apologize that it hasn't been out. It has to do with some legal stuff. I don't want to air any dirty laundry here. That's not what we're here for. But there is a reason why it's not out, and we're trying to rectify and remedy that situation so we can put the record out. And I would love nothing more than to have vinyl. And I literally an hour ago was talking to my manager about it. So yes,
Well, which leads me to my next two questions. I think first and foremost, I have to put it out there. They're going to hate me if I don't ask this, but on behalf of the Heady Wax Fiends Record Club, we would love to produce a record of Blind Melon material, anything that's available or live, previously unreleased, demos, whatever. We would figure it out. I know all of the fiends in the group would absolutely love to press something, and I will just leave it at this very simple question. Is it something you would consider
yes,
putting out an exclusive group release? Yeah, okay.
yes is your answer.
Yes is the answer, fiends. Yes is the answer.
Yeah, let's talk.
Our will do. We will follow up on this. I guarantee you we will. I just got to say, um, as a fellow record lover, um, one of my favorite things about this record club is that it's a subscription basis, and there's a record of the month that you get in the mail, and they repress some real, like they managed to repress Bela Flex Drive,
Cool.
um
Wow. Cool.
and yeah, a couple of they pressed Asher Falero, who's also in this season, his Asher Falero band album Catching Air, and Say She, and a couple of other amazing ones. And they've put the spotlight on some new artists. And the best part about it is that these records go directly into the hands of people who are going to spin them.
Great.
They're going to spin them.
Love it.
And in my opinion, that's the best thing ever, is that you're putting vinyl into the hands of people who are going to use it and not
Yeah,
just leave it on the shelf.
I love
And we're going
that.
to post about it and talk about it too, which
Love it.
is the coolest thing about it. Next question. So I'm going to change the question a little bit because I already asked you your favorite song to play. This is for my friend Justin here. His band, his vocalist was pretty well equipped for Blind Melon songs, so they were huge fans, and they played a few songs. And though they got a great response, no matter which song of theirs, or of yours rather, they played, his favorite song to play was St. Andrew's Fall.
Wow. Well, yeah.
So
Wow. Cool.
rather than ask you about your favorite song, I'd love to ask you about your feelings about that song.
Well, that song's really heavy, and I'll try to tell the story in a really short way. And I've told the story before, but you got to tell the story to talk about the song. We were playing a very famous place called St. Andrew's Hall, um, and that's in Detroit. And this is in the early '90s. We were on tour. We were still in a van at that point, so it's near the beginning of our career. And we played the show, and it's one of those great clubs that also has an amazing backstage. It's like a second floor, and you kind of look out over the city. Anyway, after the show that night, we're all high-fiving about how great the show was, feeling like we're on top of the world. And someone said, "Hey, look out the window. It looks like some girl's going to jump off of a roof." And we looked out of a window, and we all watched a girl jump 21 stories. That's a real story. That's a real story. And it changed our life, and it changed Shannon's life. And we drove to the next place in total silence. It was just one of the most heartbreaking, crazy things. I mean, we saw her leap, you know. I can picture her. I can picture the whole thing. It was she did a swan dive, and it was really sad. Anyway, a few days later, I started hearing, you know, St. Andrews Hall. The name, we go back and forth with the name. It was called St. Andrews Falls, called St. Andrews Hall, depending on the record it was released on. Yeah, that song is really heavy. So, 20 stories below, all that, that's about that song was inspired. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway,
That's
yeah,
that's
yeah, that's
uh
that song.
uh
Yeah. Shannon had a way of interpreting what we were going through, and he would write about it, and he would like deliver the song where you were like, "That was 100% my experience." When I hear that song and how it makes me feel, regardless of the lyrics, just the way it makes me feel, it just, he just had such a great way of saying, "This is what we've been through, and I'm going to write about it." And he was amazing at that. All the songs are like that. Paper Scratcher is about the guy we used to walk by who was a homeless man that Shannon used to go and talk to on La Brea. We'd walk down La Brea and Shannon would talk to this guy. We called him Paper Scratcher. So every song is like, it was just our lives. Shannon was writing about what was happening around us. It was. So that, anyway, back to that song. Also one of my favorite songs. Heavy, 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 heavy. Yeah. So anyway, that's that answer.
I again, folks, if you're not watching on YouTube, I was not prepared for that. That
Yeah.
is um most of the rest of the questions are about releasing some live music. Is there more to it? I think we've established pretty much everything about that.
We have
So
a lot of stuff to release. Yeah, we have a lot of stuff to release is what I'll say.
I'm gonna ask a question of my own. You've reformed your Blind Melon is touring.
Oh yeah, we've been reformed for 15 years now. So yeah, we've been out doing stuff. I mean, not consistently. We take years off at a time where people get busy and go on to do other projects and other things, and we go, oh, we miss each other.
Well, I should say Blind Melon is touring as of very recently at the time of this airing.
Yeah, yeah,
So
we have about 15
it's a
dates. Yeah,
cool thing.
we have about 15 dates this year coming up. Yeah.
What was it or what I guess what was the impetus to tour again as Blind Melon? I that's my question.
You know what? It
Is what
it
brought
just
that
kind of
about?
it just kind of happens organically. One, back to my manager Keith and my friend. He's just always really good at keeping us communicating as people and as friends, and it starts there. And at some point, like, I think me, Rogers, and Travis, or we were having a conversation, and we're like, "Hey, man, life's going really quick. I miss you guys. I'd love to go out and have some fun." Honestly, it's as simple as that. It's like, I miss you guys. I miss playing the songs. Life is short. Let's go out and hang out with our fans again. I miss the community. It really is that. I mean, it was just as simple as that. It's not. It has nothing to do with money. As a matter of fact, we don't make any money. It's just more just, we just want to go out and do it. We love each other, and like we have our moments where we disagree, but in the end it's like, ah, man, I miss the guys, you know what I mean? I miss the guys. And I
I
feel the
will
same way
say
about
this.
the Afghan Whigs. When I'm doing a bunch of Blind Mountain stuff, I'm like, oh man, I miss my Whigs family. I can't wait to go tour with the Afghan Whigs now. So it's just honestly, it comes down to that. It comes down to our manager keeping us communicating, and whatever 6 months ago, 8 months ago or so, it was just, we had a conversation. It was like, hey man, you want to go out and play some shows this year? Yeah, it sounds fun. It's as simple as that. So there it is.
It's wild because it's right now. I mean, at the time of this taping, and probably at the time of this airing, 30 years or so since the song came out, and my youngest siblings know it. No rain. My students know it. It's
Yeah.
a part of my life. All of my friends,
Thanks.
my parents, my in-laws,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
generations
Yeah.
of the people who I love the most in the world. This, it's just incredible that, and I'm so grateful, and I think that one of the messages of this show being the importance of bringing people on such as yourself who have been around the music industry for as long as you have and who have done as much as you have to help our younger fans, our younger readers and listeners and viewers understand that the love did not begin with us. The love started before us and was passed down to us, and it
Yeah.
came from someone before that.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful to see that, not just that you're doing it, but that you want to do it to
That's the
to
the only
keep
way
this
to do
music
it.
alive.
And that's the one thing we say in our band. I don't want anyone to do it unless they want to do it. So, and sometimes we line up and sometimes we don't. Sometimes one person in the band's like, I don't feel like touring this year. Okay, we're all busy. We can do other things. And then when we kind of line up and we go, oh man, I miss you, man. I miss it. Let's go hang out again. And and it just so happens we all kind of lined up in the way we were feeling about the band, whatever, 8 months ago or so, and we just said, let's book some shows. Let's come on, let's go do some fun stuff, man. Let's go have fun. It's really about that.
I think that's a really important perspective to share though, because a lot of folks, just I would say the casual fan, if an artist takes a hiatus for several years, especially a popular artist that folks want to see, from the outside looking in, folks may not understand. But our heroes are also just mere mortals just like us, and
Yeah,
have their lives and
yeah,
their problems and their
yeah.
things that they need to work on, and in order for them to create the art that we love so much, they need to be in a good place, and
That's
they
it.
need to be feeling right, and they need to be feeling healthy, and
That's
if
it.
there's something wrong there,
Yeah,
there's going to be something even more disastrous that comes along on the road. and
absolutely.
and because no matter what, something's gotta give. So if you're not all on board, just like you said, what's the
Yeah.
point?
Yeah, what's the point? I don't want to do it. I'd rather stay home. The truth is, I make way more money being a record producer, making records in my studio than going on tours. So when people are like, "Oh, you guys are doing it for the money," I'm like, "Fuck you! I'm gonna send you our fucking spreadsheet, you asshole." I come home in the hole, but I do it because I love it and I miss the fans. Honestly, that's the truth. You know what I mean? I make way more money staying at home, but I want it. I want it, and when everybody wants it in our band, that translates. When you see a band on stage, you can tell when they want it and when they're having a great time, and that translates. And I don't want to go tour if we don't feel that way. And we all feel that way now. So we're like, let's go out and have a party with our friends and our fans. It's just as simple as that.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way, because as one, I can promise you your fans do too, and I hope you come to Chicago soon. Christopher, thank you so, so, so much for sharing your time with me on this episode of Secondhand Talent. I really appreciate you being
You
on the
bet,
show.
man. I had fun.
Well, I sincerely appreciate it, folks. This is an episode of Secondhand Talent, and we will see you next Wednesday. And that's podcast. There we go. We did it.
All right.
Hey.
Hey, man. Well, look, keep in touch, and we should talk about
Yeah.